The summer air in downtown Houston was warm, and the streets were alive with flashing lights, music, and late-night traffic. Friday nights always brought crowds to the city's entertainment district, where restaurants, rooftop bars, and live music venues stayed busy until dawn. 26-year-old Emily Carter walked confidently along the sidewalk, her phone in one hand and her car keys in the other. She wasn't famous in Hollywood, but online, millions of people knew her name. Emily had built a reputation as someone who wasn't afraid to expose scams, dishonest businesses, and corrupt officials. Her videos had helped victims recover money and had embarrassed more than a few powerful people. That popularity had also earned her enemies. Earlier that evening, Emily had attended the grand opening of an upscale rooftop lounge. She had spent most of the night recording content with friends and speaking with followers who recognized her. Everything seemed normal until she noticed a heated argument near the parking garage. A young man was shouting at a security guard while several people stood around recording with their phones. Emily instinctively started filming. "Excuse me," she said calmly. "What's going on here?" The security guard ignored her. The young man insisted he had done nothing wrong. Within minutes, several police cruisers arrived. Blue and red emergency lights painted the buildings in flashing colors as officers stepped out of their vehicles. Emily continued recording. She believed transparency protected everyone. One officer approached her. "Ma'am, please stop recording and step back." "I'm standing in a public place," Emily replied politely. "I'm documenting what I'm seeing." The officer's expression hardened. "This is an active investigation." "So am I interfering?" Emily asked. The officer didn't answer. Instead, another officer quietly spoke into his radio while watching Emily. She felt something was wrong. Very wrong. Several minutes later, another officer walked directly toward her. "Emily Carter?" She nodded. "Yes. We need you to come with us." "For what?" "You'll be informed shortly." Emily frowned. There must be some mistake. The officer reached for a pair of handcuffs. "You are being placed under arrest." The crowd instantly turned toward her. Dozens of phones were now recording. Emily felt every eye on her. "What are the charges?" she demanded. The officer answered with only a few words. "Disorderly conduct and obstruction." Emily couldn't believe what she was hearing. "I never touched anyone. I didn't interfere with your investigation. I was only recording." Another officer took her phone. "You can explain everything downtown." Cold metal handcuffs closed around her wrists. For the first time in years, Emily felt completely powerless. As she was escorted toward the patrol vehicle, strangers whispered among themselves. "Isn't that the influencer? What did she do?" "I thought she exposed criminals." Emily lowered her head. Not because she was guilty. Because she knew how quickly public opinion could change. Inside the patrol car, the city lights blurred through the window. Emily's mind raced. None of this made sense. She replayed every moment of the evening. Had she accidentally recorded something she wasn't supposed to? Had someone deliberately set her up? She couldn't find an answer. After nearly 30 minutes, the vehicle entered the secured parking area of the county jail. Massive steel gates opened slowly. The building looked cold, gray, and lifeless. The reality finally hit her. This wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. She was actually going to jail. Inside the booking area, officers began processing new arrivals. People from every walk of life sat silently on metal benches. Some looked angry. Others looked terrified. Emily had never imagined she would be one of them. A corrections officer called her name. She stepped forward. "Empty your pockets." She placed her wallet, keys, smartwatch, jewelry, and personal belongings into a plastic tray. Another officer photographed her from several angles before taking her fingerprints. Every machine beeped mechanically. Every door echoed loudly as it locked behind someone. Everything felt cold, emotionless, like another ordinary night for everyone except her. Emily asked again. "I want to speak with my lawyer." "You'll get your phone call later," the officer replied without looking up. Hours seemed to pass. The fluorescent lights never dimmed. The air conditioning made the room feel freezing. Emily watched exhausted people come and go while wondering how quickly her life outside was falling apart. Her phone was gone. Her social media accounts were silent. Her family probably had no idea where she was. News websites might already be reporting her arrest. Everything she had worked years to build could disappear overnight. Late into the night, another corrections officer approached. "Follow me." Emily stood and walked through a maze of locked hallways. Heavy metal doors slammed shut behind them. The deeper they went, the quieter everything became. She realized this was only the beginning. Somewhere inside that building, people had already judged her before hearing her side of the story. But Emily made herself one promise. No matter how powerful the people behind this arrest were, she would uncover the truth. And when she finally walked back into the sunlight, someone was going to answer for what had happened. The steel door closed behind Emily with a deafening clang. It was a sound she had only heard in movies. Now it echoed through her chest like a warning. Every hallway inside the county jail looked the same. Gray concrete walls, fluorescent lights that never seemed to switch off, and cameras mounted high above every intersection. A correctional officer led her toward the women's intake housing unit. "Keep moving," he said without looking back. Emily remained silent. She knew arguing would only make things worse. As they passed one cell after another, she noticed frightened faces staring through narrow windows. Some inmates ignored her completely, while others whispered among themselves. "New girl. She doesn't look like she belongs here." Emily tried to ignore them. Inside, however, fear had begun replacing the confidence she had carried for years. The intake officer handed Emily a folded set of standard jail clothing. "You'll be processed according to facility policy," she said professionally. Emily nodded. Everything felt humiliating, not because of any single procedure, but because she had gone from being an independent woman with millions of followers to an inmate identified only by a booking number. When the processing was complete, she was escorted to a temporary holding cell. The room was small. A steel bench ran along one wall. The air was cold. There were no windows. Only silence. Emily wrapped her arms around herself and stared at the floor. She kept replaying the arrest in her mind. Something didn't add up. The charges had been weak. The officers had acted as if they already knew who she was. And someone had been unusually eager to take her phone. Several hours later, footsteps echoed outside. The door opened. A correctional officer stepped inside with a clipboard. His name badge read, Officer Daniel Brooks. He studied Emily for several uncomfortable seconds before speaking. "So, you're the famous internet girl." Emily looked at him carefully. "I'm here because of a mistake." Officer Brooks smiled. "That's what everyone says." His tone wasn't openly threatening, but something about his attitude made Emily uneasy. He leaned casually against the doorway. "You've caused a lot of problems for people online. I exposed people breaking the L." Depends who you ask." Emily said nothing. After another moment, he walked away. The heavy door slammed shut. Over the next 2 days, Emily noticed something strange. Whenever Officer Brooks was assigned nearby, he found excuses to stop outside her cell. Sometimes he made sarcastic remarks. Other times he hinted that people with influence often learn their place after spending time behind bars. He never crossed into physical violence, but his behavior was clearly unprofessional and intimidating. Emily realized he enjoyed making inmates feel powerless. One afternoon, another female correctional officer quietly approached Emily during meal distribution. "Ignore Brooks," she whispered. Emily looked surprised. "What do you mean?" The officer hesitated. "Just don't react to him." Before Emily could ask another question, she walked away. That single warning told Emily everything she needed to know. She wasn't imagining it. That evening, Emily finally received her first phone call. Her lawyer, Michael Hayes, answered immediately. Emily, relief flooded through her. "Michael, thank God. I've been trying to find out what happened. I don't understand any of this." Michael's voice became serious. "The charges don't make sense." "What does that mean?" "It means someone pushed this case through unusually fast." Emily closed her eyes. "I knew it." "Listen carefully," Michael continued. "Don't argue with anyone inside. Don't sign anything without me. And remember everything. Every conversation. Every name. Every detail. Emily took a deep breath. I will. That night, sleep refused to come. Instead, Emily began studying her surroundings. She noticed which cameras rotated, which officers actually treated inmates with respect, which ones ignored policy, which doors opened at what times. Her years as an investigative journalist had trained her to observe details other people overlooked. She couldn't fight back from inside a jail cell, but she could gather information. She tore a tiny corner from a paper meal bag and began keeping secret notes whenever she could. Names, times, conversations, patterns. If someone had abused their authority to put her here, she would expose them the same way she had exposed everyone else. Only this time, the story was personal, and she intended to finish it. The next morning began like every other. Metal doors echoed through the housing unit. Keys rattled against thick utility belts. Announcements crackled through old speakers mounted high on the walls. For everyone else, it was just another day inside the jail. For Emily Carter, it was the day she decided to stop being a victim. She would become an investigator again. Emily had spent 3 nights studying everything around her. She noticed that every officer followed a routine. Shift changes happened at the same times. Meal carts arrived within minutes of each other. Security cameras covered nearly every hallway, though a few maintenance corridors had poor visibility. Most importantly, she noticed that while many correctional officers treated inmates with professionalism, a small handful, including Officer Daniel Brooks, often ignored procedure. Brooks enjoyed intimidation. He raised his voice unnecessarily. He mocked inmates who asked questions. He acted differently whenever supervisors were nearby. Emily realized something important. People like Brooks relied on fear. If nobody spoke up, they remained untouchable. Later that afternoon, Emily met another inmate during recreation. Her name was Lisa Morgan, a middle-aged accountant awaiting trial for financial fraud. Unlike many others, Lisa spoke calmly and observed everything before saying a word. "You aren't a criminal," Lisa said quietly. Emily smiled faintly. "Is it that obvious? You still look people in the eyes." Emily laughed for the first time since her arrest. The two women spent nearly an hour talking. Emily explained how she had been arrested while recording a public incident. Lisa frowned. "That sounds convenient." "What do you mean?" "I've seen people brought in here for real crimes. You don't look like one of them." Emily nodded. "Neither do I." Over the following days, trust slowly formed between them. Lisa had been inside long enough to understand the jail's routines. She quietly pointed out which officers could be trusted and which ones were best avoided. "Officer Ramirez," Lisa whispered one afternoon. "He's fair." "What about Brooks?" Lisa hesitated. "I'd stay away from him." Emily noticed the hesitation immediately. "You know something." Lisa looked around to make sure nobody was listening. "I've heard complaints." "Official complaints?" Lisa shook her head. "No. People are afraid." Emily's heartbeat quickened. If Brooks had a history of abusing his authority, there had to be a record somewhere. That evening, Emily finally met Officer Ramirez. Unlike Brooks, he spoke respectfully. "You've got a visitor tomorrow." "My lawyer." He nodded. Emily felt hope returning. Before leaving, Ramirez quietly added, "If something isn't right here, tell your attorney." Emily looked at him. "You believe me?" Ramirez didn't answer directly. Instead, he simply said, "Truth has a way of surviving." Then he walked away. The next morning, Emily sat across from attorney Michael Hayes inside a secure interview room. He opened a thick folder. "I've been digging." "What did you find?" Michael slid several documents across the table. "The body camera footage from your arrest is missing." Emily stared at him. "Missing?" "It was supposedly corrupted. And the witness statements. Several disappeared." Emily leaned back. "This wasn't an accident." "No." Michael nodded. "I think someone wanted this case to move quickly before anyone asked questions." Emily took a deep breath. "What about Officer Brooks?" Michael looked surprised. "Why him?" Emily explained everything. The intimidation, the strange comments, and the warnings from other inmates. Michael listened carefully. When she finished, he closed the folder. "I'll request internal records." If there's a pattern, we'll find it. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling while replaying every conversation she'd had since arriving. One sentence kept echoing in her mind. Truth has a way of surviving. She realized revenge wasn't about anger. It wasn't about making someone suffer. It was about exposing corruption so completely that nobody could hide behind a badge or a title ever again. The next morning, Emily began writing a detailed timeline from memory. Every officer, every conversation, every unusual incident, every missing piece. If someone had framed her, they had underestimated one thing. Emily Carter had built her career uncovering hidden truths. Now, she was documenting the biggest investigation of her life. And somewhere beyond those concrete walls, the first cracks in the conspiracy had already begun to appear. The following week, the atmosphere inside the county jail began to change. Emily noticed it immediately. Supervisors who had rarely visited the housing unit were suddenly making unannounced inspections. Officers were being asked to sign additional reports, and conversations stopped whenever a lieutenant walked into the room. Someone had started asking questions, and someone else was getting nervous. Officer Daniel Brooks was no longer as confident as before. He still tried to intimidate inmates, but Emily noticed small differences. He checked over his shoulder more often. He became irritated when security cameras were nearby. He frequently argued with other officers about paperwork. One afternoon, Emily watched from inside her cell as Brooks slammed a clipboard onto a desk. "I already filled this report out once," he snapped. A supervising sergeant remained calm. "Then filling it out again shouldn't be a problem." Brooks muttered something under his breath before walking away. Emily quietly smiled. Pressure was building. Meanwhile, attorney Michael Hayes was making progress outside the jail. His requests for records had uncovered several inconsistencies. Time logs didn't match officer reports. Some surveillance footage had unexplained gaps. Several official documents had been edited after they were originally submitted. None of those discoveries bet a crime by themselves. But together, they painted a troubling picture. Michael knew he needed one more piece of evidence. Back inside the jail, Officer Ramirez approached Emily during the evening meal. Without drawing attention, he slid a folded piece of paper across the table. "It's your legal paperwork," he said loudly enough for others to hear. Emily nodded and waited until she returned to her cell before unfolding it. Inside was a short handwritten note. "Internal Affairs is asking questions. Keep documenting everything." Her heart raced. This was no longer just her word against Brooks. A formal investigation had begun. The next morning, 2 investigators wearing plain clothes entered the facility. They spoke privately with supervisors before interviewing several correctional officers. Later that afternoon, inmates were interviewed one at a time. When Emily's turn came, she entered a quiet office where a woman introduced herself. "My name is Special Investigator Karen Mitchell." She placed a digital recorder on the table. "We're conducting an administrative investigation." Emily looked directly at her. "I've been waiting for someone to ask." For nearly 2 hours, Emily carefully described everything she had witnessed since arriving at the jail. She avoided exaggeration. She stuck to facts, dates, times, conversations. The investigator listened without interrupting. When Emily finished, Karen closed her notebook. "You've kept excellent records," Emily replied quietly. "I've spent years documenting the truth." Over the next several days, more witnesses came forward. Some correctional officers admitted they had seen Brooks violate department policy. Former inmates submitted written statements through their attorneys. Even jail employees who had remained silent for years finally agreed to cooperate. The investigation grew larger than anyone had expected. It was no longer about Emily alone. It was about a pattern of misconduct that had gone unchecked. Then, early one Monday morning, everything changed. Emily heard hurried footsteps outside the housing unit. Several supervisors entered together. Officer Brooks was standing near the control desk when the jail captain approached him. "Officer Brooks." He turned around. "Yes, Captain. You need to come with us." Brooks frowned. "What's this about?" "You'll be informed downstairs." The captain nodded toward another supervisor. "Collect his badge." For the first time since Emily had entered the jail, She saw fear in Brooks' eyes. He looked around as though expecting someone to defend him. No one did. Silently, he removed his badge and placed it on the desk. The housing unit fell completely silent as he was escorted away. No shouting. No arguments. Just the sound of heavy footsteps disappearing down the hallway. Later that evening, Officer Ramirez stopped briefly outside Emily's cell. Without saying much, he simply nodded. The investigation isn't over. Emily understood. Justice wasn't a single moment. It was a process. And for the first time since her arrest, she believed the truth was finally winning. She looked through the narrow window of her cell door. Beyond the concrete walls, she knew the fight was far from over. But the people who had abused their power had made one fatal mistake. They believed they could silence the wrong woman. Instead, they had given her the biggest story of her life. Morning sunlight filtered through the narrow windows of the county jail, casting pale lines across the concrete floor. For the first time since her arrest, Emily Carter felt something she hadn't experienced in weeks. Hope. The investigation had continued around the clock. Internal Affairs had collected surveillance footage from different parts of the facility, reviewed officer reports, and interviewed inmates, correctional staff, and supervisors. The inconsistencies Emily and her attorney had uncovered were no longer isolated mistakes. They formed a pattern. Attorney Michael Hayes arrived that afternoon with a determined expression. As soon as he entered the interview room, Emily could tell something had changed. He placed a thick file on the table. "We did it." Emily stared at him. "What happened?" The prosecutor reviewed the evidence. He opened the folder and slid several official documents toward her. "Every criminal charge against you has been dismissed." Emily closed her eyes. For weeks she had imagined hearing those words. Now they finally felt real. "So, I'm free." Michael smiled. "As soon as the paperwork is processed." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Emily wasn't celebrating. She was thinking about everyone else who had suffered because nobody had listened. Later that day, the steel door opened. A correctional officer handed Emily her personal belongings. Her phone, her wallet, her watch. The same items she had surrendered on the night of her arrest. Only now they represented something different. Freedom. As she stepped through the jail's main entrance, a crowd of reporters waited outside. Microphones were raised. Camera flashes lit up the afternoon sky. Someone shouted, "Emily, did the police arrest the wrong person?" Another reporter asked, "What are you going to do now?" Emily paused. She looked directly into the cameras. "I believed the truth would come out. It did. I am grateful to everyone who had the courage to tell the truth." She refused to attack every police officer. Instead, she made one point clear. Most officers serve with honesty and integrity. This case is about individuals who abuse their authority, not the entire profession. Her calm response quickly spread across television and social media. Millions watched. Weeks later, an independent investigation concluded. Several officials faced disciplinary action for falsifying reports and attempting to conceal evidence. Officer Daniel Brooks was dismissed from his position and faced legal proceedings for misconduct and abuse of authority. The department announced new oversight measures and additional training designed to prevent similar abuses in the future. Emily followed every development quietly. She never celebrated another person's downfall. She only cared that accountability had finally arrived. Several months later, Emily uploaded a new video. The title simply read, "The truth always leaves a trail." Instead of focusing on herself, she spoke about justice, accountability, and the importance of reporting misconduct through lawful channels. The video became her most watched upload. Thousands of viewers shared stories about standing up for the truth. Many thanked her for giving them hope that powerful people could still be held accountable. One evening, Emily walked through the same downtown streets where everything had begun. The city looked exactly the same. The flashing lights, the busy sidewalks, the sounds of traffic. But she had changed. She had entered that night believing cameras only recorded history. She left knowing that courage could change it. She smiled as she looked toward the skyline. "They took my freedom for a while," she whispered. "But they never took my voice." And with that, she walked forward, not driven by revenge anymore, but by justice. The end.